you want to be successful? Do you want to grow your business? Do you want to dominate the day? Then you're going to need Big Skip Energy. Welcome to the Big Skip Energy Podcast, man. How are we doing this morning?
I love the name. The name is unparalleled. It's phenomenal.
Well, you know, it gets noticed. That's for sure. It gets noticed.
Are you in Texas or what part of the country are you in?
No, I'm actually based out of Georgia. Currently, I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm actually doing this recording from a hotel room, but I actually live in Middle South Georgia. So I'm from the metro area originally.
Yeah, the great state of Georgia. That's great.
Yeah, man. But
are you a Bulldog fan? Are you a Bulldog?
Actually, hold on a second. Because I'm in a hotel, I can do this.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, just reach over to the suitcase and get the hoodie out. But yeah, man, absolutely. Awesome. Absolutely. So, Rick, welcome to the show. Take a second, if you would, introduce yourself to the audience. Let them know who you are, what you're all about, man.
Yeah, no, look, I appreciate the opportunity to connect. And it's good to meet you for the first time, actually. I heard the podcast and your thought leadership and the people you've interviewed. And so when you reached out to me, I was honored and it's cool to be connected to you. Been in the business over 20 years, since the early 2000s. And I've really spent the majority of my time in retail, growing mortgage companies, acquiring mortgage companies, putting in process procedures and systems that are sustainable for growth. And I've just been fortunate enough to have a real national awareness, like around in markets across the country. I've had branches in Georgia for years, but I have a unique perspective because I've had my hands in the real estate community and in the mortgage community in Mobile, Alabama to, Billings, Montana to Spokane, Washington to Princeton, West Virginia, just all over the country. And it's just been an amazing ride, to be honest with you, just going through the number of cycles that we've gone through. It definitely puts a certain sober perspective when market events occur. You're like, okay, we got this, we've done this, we've been here, done that. Yep. Different disruption, but kind of the same sort of consequence of either liquidity or underwriting sort of adjustments to adjust to market circumstances. So but my focus right now as EVP of retail over at Sierra Pacific is to kind of grow the organization. It's a 50-state platform and from a licensing standpoint, and they, have a lot of capital, a lot of servicing. And Jay, who's the president of the company, is someone I've admired in the business from afar from his time at Stearns. Mm-hmm. And so when he called and we just started building a relationship, I just said, hey man, let's put that capital to use. And he said, let's go. So,
all right. Very cool. So I always like to ask this of a mortgage lifer, because you're in it for the long haul, obviously, just like me. How did you get into the mortgage business?
Yeah. My father had a real estate and sort of a mortgage company in the 80s. And so I think we were just always sort of around the business. Mm-hmm. But I remember thinking to myself going into college, I did my undergrad was in electrical engineering and actually philosophy. And I just remember saying to myself, I just never wanted to go into mortgage. This was like in 1995, 1996. Yeah. And so I was in tech for the first 6 or 7 years. And then I transitioned. I started a small CRM company called SGI out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and sold that and then rolled some of that capital into a company called PushMX Software, which was a bolt-on to Calyx. And because sort of their whole focus was pipeline management to kind of compete with this fledgling product called Encompass. And so we bolted that onto Point to try to be a bit more, competitive with Encompass. And then, the housing crisis occurred. That company sort of blew up. In other words, it cratered. It sort of died with other mortgage companies or tech companies. But Calyx really liked what I was doing and was like, look, you understand the business like an originator, but you understand tech as well. So why don't you come and run our sales, marketing, business development, that sort of thing. Huh? And so I worked with them for 2.5 years. And then I transitioned. I started a consulting practice called Menlo Company out of Menlo Park, California, where our focus primarily at the time was tech integrations for mortgage companies, a lot of M&A, warehouse kind of due diligence on companies, because it was this massive migration. Like the broker channel had pretty much collapsed. I think the broker market share fell to like 8% at the time. Mm-hmm. And so much of the production was swinging to either the larger mortgage companies, the retail mortgage companies that had the liquidity and depositories, right?
Right.
So I kind of rode that wave, and then the wave started settling into more of a non-depository. So the pendulum started to swing back away from the depository over the non-depository, probably around 2013, 14, 15.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely, UWM, I think, did a pretty masterful job in architecting a way of assembling a broker channel so that you saw in 2000, like 15, 16, 17, kind of this like broker to banker transition platforms, helping brokers become, or rather banker to broker platforms, how to start your own brokerage shop. UWM and a good friend of mine kind of ran that division for them, that guy named Vince Parla. And they just did an incredible job. So I've seen this pendulum swing between, the whole brokers are better movement to like brokers are dead, or brokers are dead to brokers are better.
Yeah.
To, retail versus non-depository. And so I think we're at a pretty healthy point in the market right now. But anyways, so that's long story short, how I got into the business and how I got to where I am.
So what is it about this industry that has kept you in it? Because the reason I'm asking is because, listen, it's been a rocky 24 months, right?
Yeah.
And so we've seen a lot of people exiting, and a conversation that I have a lot with people that I coach and train, and it has been a theme on here before as well, is remembering your why. Why are you still doing this? Why are you focused and dedicated to this business? And so that's what I'm asking, what's kept you going through all these different cycles? You came into the business about the same time I did, in the early 2000s. So the first refi boom, we go through that. We had the banking crisis. We get through that. We got a new regulatory environment. Then we hit COVID. Now we hit this 4 or 5 cycles in a span of half a career. Right. So, what keeps you going, man?
What's interesting, it's a combination of pivots. Like, you really have to be aware of the pivot. And what I mean by that is the one denomination across the industry, I think, for companies and individuals who have evolved in it, people have adapted to the changing circumstances. And if you're not aware of those changing trends, then I think you're inherently putting your organization or your career in jeopardy. I've been fortunate in that, you highlighted some of the big shifts, '08, and of course, the changing dynamics between, non-depository to depository, and then sort of swing back, and then COVID and so on. But we've had these micro shifts. 2013 was hard because there was a big burst in the second to third quarter and rates that shut down a lot of consumer direct platforms. Team was really tough, margin compression and all these sort of.
18 and 19 were actually pretty. They were pretty.
18 was brutal. 19 was an unexpectedly good year because everyone was so afraid that it was going to be a repeat of 18. And there's some interesting parallels between 2023 going into 2024 between 18 and 19, but especially in production volume. But so what's kept me aware is I've always focused on channels of the business that tend to be up when the market is down. And like, obviously in 2013 and 2018, M&A was really big. 2023 to 24, M&A is really big. So I've been really active on the acquisition side of the business and the market consolidation. So getting really good at certain skill sets when the market is down, I think has really probably been at the heart of what's kept me sort of plugged into it, to be honest with you.
Okay. So, well, let's shift that more to you personally. Like, what gets you up in the morning and keeps you like, hey, you know what? Every day over the last 20 something years, this is why I get up out of bed and go to work in this industry. What is that drive, man?
What's interesting, Skip, both on a personal level and on a professional level, what has always driven me is assisting either people or companies to achieve levels of success that they didn't really think that they could do themselves, and really working with them to achieve it, and having a really clear path of how someone could be successful or a mortgage company could be successful that they really didn't even know was possible.
I love you said that. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, man, but you really pinged a hot point for me. So there's a sales and business development trainer out there. His name's Mark Hunter. I don't know if you've ever heard of him or ran across him, but his whole essential tagline is sales is all about helping people achieve what they didn't think was possible. And that really goes to what you just said. And, I think that's a big motivation for me personally. Obviously now, for you too. So yeah, I love that. I love that.
It's part of it is because you see something in a company that they either because they've been so tunneled and focused to what kind of in what they're doing
Mm-hmm.
that they don't really see the larger picture of what they could do with the company or the opportunities that they could have outside of their local markets or what have you.
Yeah.
Now there's, because of that lack of experience or the lack of depth in that vision, they took, the resistance tends to be really high and, the resistance to change, the fear of change. Oftentimes, companies or even individuals have achieved a certain level of success where pride gets in the way. And they don't understand that level of success could easily evaporate and either put themselves or their families or their companies in jeopardy.
Yeah.
But so it is kind of it is a dynamic that's a bit challenging for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's funny because my previous company that I was with, it actually shut down on its 30-year anniversary, right?
Yeah. What company was
And
that? Was it Hometown Lenders?
no, it's Crescent Mortgage Company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Fowler Williams ran that. So United Bank purchased it, and unfortunately, just didn't to make it past 2023. But I think that's a good example though of just because you've done something successfully previously, if you don't make those changes, don't make that adaptation. Sometimes it takes an outside person like you, me, whatever, to come in there and say, "Hey, look, guys, we're going to have to kind of get out of our comfort zone a little bit, try and do things a little differently." And people are resistant to change.
Yeah.
But you said something a second ago that I want to touch on. You said, reaching a broader audiences and kind of getting out there, which is a good transition to talk about social media because you've got a big presence on LinkedIn. And, my fractional co-host, Kayla Calendar, obviously is big in social media and that kind of thing. Let's talk about that for a minute, man. What kind of things do you typically focus on? I know we've discussed this a little bit before we started recording, but what kind of things do you typically focus on from a social media presence perspective?
People tend look, there's a lot of noise in social media, right?
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily I think there are a lot of people who do podcasts or they do posts and they really don't have a lot to say. And
Yeah.
I think they just contribute, I think, to the noise. I think what separates the noise, I think, from the substance that sort of curdles to the top are really sort of the posts that are very timely, posts that are interesting, that are content rich, posts that are substantive, posts that really are almost at the tongue of the industry. So, obviously when I started doing posts immediately when COVID hit, there was so much confusion, right, around what was happening in that March and April timeframe. And there was kind of a lot of panic because there was a liquidity crunch. Non-QM pretty much shut off like that.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And Jumbo.
And so, there was just sort of a temporary capital freeze and everyone was trying to figure out what was going on. So I would do sort of at the time, I don't know if it was daily, but I did several sort of podcasts, I think, or video sessions that was pretty insightful. I think the feedback I got was very positive because it kind of shed light on various economic conditions or various matters that
Yeah.
that people were really confused about. So I think content needs to be sort of very timely and it needs to really lead the class, ahead in the conversation rather than just constantly beating an old drum that like everyone sort of hashed and rehashed. It just
Yeah.
becomes kind of very uninteresting.
Yeah. Listen, I work with banks and credit unions. They are notorious for having the most boring feeds on social media, right? They're going to put up
Oh, sure.
your generic Mother's Day post, your generic Happy New Year, don't forget turn your clocks back post, that kind of stuff. That
Yeah.
doesn't do anything. There's no one's going to engage in that, right?
Yeah.
And you, as a thought leader and functional leader in the retail space, I'm sure, you get questions all the time from retail LOs saying, "Hey, look, you know, I don't really know what to put out there." And I want to get your thoughts on this because I actually coach and train people to say, "Hey, look, okay, if you're not super comfortable creating content, which is where you need to be, in the meantime, engage in someone else's content because there's a lot of
Yeah.
substance in that conversation, in that feed that can also be. What are your thoughts on that?"
like on what specifically? You said a lot in like in one, but what was the specific question?
Well, so do you think that there's as much value in engaging in someone else's post as there is to posting something on your own?
Oh, yeah. No, I think what I tend to do, it depends on the length of my comment. Like what I tend to
Yeah.
do is I tend to repost it with my comment. And then, cause obviously when you repost something, it helps, someone else as well, rather than just having to sort of comment within the post. It just depends how good or insightful the post really is and what, how strongly I feel about my comment on it. If I feel pretty strongly about it, I'll just repost it and then use
Yeah.
my comment as the headline and just point to the, the post that I'm
Yeah, I
reposting.
love that repost for your thoughts button on LinkedIn. That's always good.
No, it's, and I think the other part of it is it depends on who, what your, or who your target audience is. My target
Right.
audience tends to be, mortgage loan officers, real estate agents, C-level sort of executives. And I tend to target, they tend to be in both LinkedIn and Facebook, right? Sort of the generational, 40 something and up kind of crowds. I haven't really figured out, the Instagram model just yet. I'm trying to figure out how exactly I can drive, I think, purposeful and meaningful content for sort of Instagram sort of consumption. But cause there's a handful of people that I think that do it really well. I just haven't really figured that out just yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to, but it's not there yet.
Well, okay. So let's shift a little bit to the market. We're not going to have an in-depth market conversation here because that'll just bore everybody to tears. But and half of it would be speculation. But what are your marching orders to your teams out there when they've got a situation with the market they're facing right now, limited inventory, higher rates, blah, 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 blah. We've all heard this beaten to death. But, what are you saying? Hey, look, when someone says, well, hey, I should wait till rates come down or, when are rates going to come down? That kind of thing. What are you telling your team to be able to convey to borrowers?
Look, a healthy mortgage market, and you need to look at the sort of historic trends, and you walk the consumer and you walk real estate agents through this, but a healthy mortgage market really has a normative rate between 6.5% to 8%, right?
Mm.
And we're kind of in that normative rate. The objective is to embrace reality where we are, because where we are is where we're going to be, right?
Mm.
Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie have made it very clear, both privately and in public conversations, that the federal government and the GSEs want the market to adjust to a 6.5% to 7.5% interest rate environment. Okay. Could be a little bit higher, could be a little bit lower, but the Fed needs tools to be able to rescue during different economic cycles.
Yeah.
And if rates are at 3-4%, there's almost no tools that, you have very limited tools to be able to provide any kind of resources to the public if you're already scraping at sort of such low rate levels. So number one is to really educate the consumer, saying like, we are in an actually a really good rate environment. 7.5% is not a bad rate environment. It's quite good. It's quite healthy. We need to have a housing market that's in this rate sort of tranche. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be number one. Number two is that, look, the reality is if rates dip, you can always refinance. If you need a house now, pull the trigger. Right. And I would become because of the rise, the average unit costs of a home or the average price of a home is going up, and in many markets really going up, which requires, more of a down payment, whether it's an FHA or a conventional loan, where 3%, 10%, 20%, whatever it is. Still cash is cash, and that's money out of pocket. So, I would really become an expert at various innovative down payment assistance programs or different programs that can assist the borrower with the down payment, which could be different than a state-driven DPA or a county-driven DPA. Some of them are actually quite good. Okay.
Yep.
They actually do help consumers. Georgia has Georgia Dream. Other states have their own programs, but I think that knowing, how to help the consumer come up with a down payment and then actually structure the, the best, mortgage. I think right now isn't even that bad of a market to do ARMs, quite honestly, because I do think that rates are going to moderate and probably slightly dip over the course of the next 12 months. And it's quite possible we could be in the low to mid sixes. The reality is if you get someone, into either a rate in a normative rate now or a structured product now to refinance later, those are all just great strategies. And it puts you in front of the consumer, every 6 to 12 months to kind of check in on them, to be able to save money. on a rate.
Yeah. That's why the credit union space has had so much luck with their portfolio ARM products.
Oh yeah.
It's because they being the consumers can't seem to get it in the secondary market necessarily because of the yield curve, all kind of stuff. But so they're turning to someone that is willing to do it. It's a great product. You're absolutely right on that. So, all right, we are running close to the end of our show today. So I wanted to ask you one more thing, man.
Yeah.
Let's talk about beer because I saw on your profile a while back that you're into a brewery. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My cousin and I started a brewery called Censored Monkey Brewery. And my cousin is more of the brewer. He's more of the chemist in his background. So he loves playing with different recipes. And so we started Censored Monkey, and it's really all about government conspiracies, right? It's all about any point in time the government has lied to you, misled you, or tried to exert some level of control that the public, whether you're right or left, just resists, right? And so we came out with a really good beer, really good IPA, really light, kind of a lighter on the lighter side, and it's not too hoppy, kind of a West Coast IPA called Free Speech is the name of the beer. And it's been a huge hit. Like we've typically, like brewers, if you do 100 barrels in a year, you're a rock star brewer. Okay. You're a rock star brewery, like as a startup. We'll probably do that in 6 months, 6 or 7 months. It's the beer itself has been a huge hit. We partnered with a brewery called White Lion Brewery here in Western Massachusetts, and they've just been exceptional in the actual production and the distribution of it as I've gotten our licensing. But we're going to come out with a beer called like WMD for the weapons of mass destruction, and it's going to be this graphical kind of like, where's the weapons of mass destruction? Another one's going to be called Grassy Knoll after the Kennedy assassination and kind of the single shooter theory kind of thing that pretty much everyone knows is bogus. So, but we are going to, there's all kinds of ideas that we have.
Oh, man, that's a lot of fun.
We're going to do one called Tower 11 because it was like, there's all the conspiracies around like, why would this tower collapse completely separate from the two towers that were hit by the planes at 9/11? And then the separate tower just collapses. So part of it is just, we're not giving credibility to the conspiracies. It's more the fact that the conspiracies are out there. And so we're kind of, having a little fun, both at the right and the left politically, at their expense. So it's going to be a hit. It's going to be a hit. What's that?
Equal opportunity offender. I love it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's Censored Monkey Brewery, censoredmonkey.com is the website, but it's Censored Monkey Brewery in Chicopee, Massachusetts, where my family has had 150 years or so roots and as immigrants into the country, they settled there in Chicopee. So
I love it, man.
Yeah.
All right. So if anybody wants to get in contact with you, learn more about you, where should they go? What should they do?
No, I would just go to my LinkedIn profile, Rick Roque, ROQUE, or just call my cell phone number. My number is 413-297-6895. My information's on. I publish my cell phone number on my LinkedIn page. But yeah, no, feel free to reach out. I'd love to. I always love talking about the market and housing and how to get people into housing. That's a big passion.
Yeah. I know this is a weird spot to put this comment, but I was on a sales call a couple of weeks ago, and one of the owners of the company that I work for now, Mark Milam, brought up a stat, and I cannot remember the source, but he said 33% of all denials could have been averted if DPA was part of it.
100%. Yeah.
And that goes to what you mentioned earlier. So guys out there, originators, companies, if you're not getting into DPA.
Oh yeah. There's a great startup company called Crib Equity that actually provides, I call them like the rich uncle, but it's a private equity firm out of San Francisco. And what they'll do is they'll put half to 2/3 of the down payment along with the borrower. They're not a co-borrower, and they put their company name, if you will, on the title. So that way, over the course of 10 years, as the consumer either has an opportunity to refinance to sort of pay them out their contribution, or if they move or whatever, they can get sort of cashed out. But yeah, there's a number of innovative DPA solutions out there that are way beyond the traditional DPAs.
The housing authorities.
That lenders tend to just sort of avoid. But yeah.
Awesome, man. Listen, again, if y'all want to learn more about Rick, go to LinkedIn, give him a holler. Rick, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Skip, man. I love the energy. Love the big Skip energy. This is good stuff.
All right, bud. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care, man.